So welcome to the Node.js package maintenance team meeting for January 18th, 2024. I will ask everybody if you can add yourselves to the issue for the agenda. Here's the link. Before I forget, is there any news or announcements that people would like to share before we get started? Okay. If not, we can move on to the issues that were tagged. The first one is 582, transferring projects into PKGS. I think Wes, you created that one, so maybe you can kick off the discussion.
So this was more of just like a bookkeeping thing to make sure we're like, I mean, what I think we've done is not really be very careful about this. But we've just like transferred things in as necessary. I think this came up because we were talking about it with the package metadata interrupt thing. And I think we were deciding if we needed a home for some of the other things. So we've got the tooling part, but we're also doing the research around it, which will end up being like a fuel for like documentation and stuff.
Yep.
And I think the idea was like, hey, let's just make sure if we want to do this, we know what we need to do, because there's like, we have to meet the OpenJS Foundation guidelines as well. And
Yeah.
and again, I just don't think we had done that with some of the packages that are in PKGJS. And I don't know if it's an issue, but I just wanted to raise it in case we needed
Yeah,
to do
we definitely have this as the governance. So like this is we do have something that says like, okay, here's our process for adding, deleting, archiving, or transferring into or out of the organization, right? So there should be an issue created. And I guess that one is like, we even say like in some cases we may need OpenJS or CPC approval. So I think it's kind of like that would be the process whereby we really should open an issue before we move something in. And in that issue, it's up to I forget what we call them, like the administrative members to say, hey, like, does it have the required license file is the one that always comes to mind, like our boilerplate, right? And is there any concerns? And I think that's very consistent with what we do in the Node project, to be honest.
Yeah, I think that was the goal. And I just wanted to make sure we either, I don't know, knew that or were in agreement that that was, and just like just like if we were transferring it into Node, we should meet all those requirements. So if we're all right with that, then probably this doesn't need very much discussion. We just close it and everybody knows that's the process.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Like the one thing I would add is what I think we really need is automation, which helps us as well, so that like, if files are missing, for example, one of the things I talked to at the foundation level is like a tool that just would scan all your repos and say like, hey, you have no license, right? Like that was something that hopefully all of our projects should be running on all of your repos. Because like for the Node project particularly, we've got tons of them, right? And our process basically requires us manually to make sure the right thing happens, but it's kind of easy to forget one of them or whatever, right? And so some tooling to close the loop to say, hey, you're missing these key things. And the reason I sort of brought it up to the foundation level is like, I think that should apply to all the projects, right? So it would be like, hey, you're missing these key things. Maybe you should do something, would be a really useful thing to have in place.
Yeah, I very much agree with that. That would be awesome. I think like when we founded the PKGGS org, like that, hosting a tool like that was under that group was literally the goal. Like if somebody wanted to build that and we would just go enable it on all the Node.js repos, like that would
Yeah.
be spectacular.
Yeah. And I think, and yes, exactly. Like if somebody wanted to build it and even, I think Jordan mentioned that he had a tool that was similar. It's sort of build it was one part, but also help roll it out across the different orgs would be the second part.
Yeah. And also then there's the NPM team has that OSS template thing, which is more for rolling out changes. So I wonder if there's maybe some two-part thing here, right? Because it's not just do you have it? It's as we change things, is it easy to update? Yeah, that's the one I was thinking of. I don't know if maybe we leverage that or actually, Darcy, maybe do you know, is there a way to actually, if we have that, do we even need a linter type thing like for that? Maybe that solves the problem just by rolling it out.
Yeah, you'll probably want to, because that codifies NPM, the NPM team specific standards. You'll want to like modify it for whatever you're tracking. Uh, it does essentially the work of managing, with some nuance, but managing those standards across the configured repos. And when I say configured repos, I mean any project that includes this as a dependency. You get the benefit of it essentially kicking off a dependent bot. Like every time you update this, let's say you have a change to a license, or let's say like a CI workflow that you expect to have in the project, it's going to kick off. Like dependent bot will kick off a PR and open that against the repo that's configured as dependency, because it's, obviously tracking updates that way, which is nice. But it does require that each project that wants to use that template define it as a dependency of the project. So there is some like nuance to the fact that you have to get every project on board with like pulling it in. It isn't like um, it doesn't happen like, yeah, it doesn't happen like in a third party way. Like it's not doing tracking of a configured set of uh, projects. Whereas like the other thing I linked, which is the status board, that is more similar to I think the reporting that Michael's talking about, like just doing analysis. Um,
Right. Like I'd love to have something. I guess what my suggestion was like, and even we should almost run this at potentially at the foundation level, right? Is to say, I can just point this at the Node.js org and it lists all the repos and it lists like key attributes. And like if you did it, if you ran it at the OpenJS level, you'd want to say, well, we believe that every project should have a license, they should have a contributing, they should have a code of conduct. Like some of the things like the code of conduct we actually say you need to have, right? So, if there was an accompanying tool that just says like, hey, as a cross-project council, we can look at all our orgs. Up, they're all green, great. They're not green. And then the projects themselves, I know for like the Node project, it would be handy for like, say the TSC to periodically look at this thing and say, yeah, we've now got 300 orgs or 300 projects. Are any of them missing these key things, right? And I would keep it simpler, like, we don't want coverage. We don't want, this would just be like governance wise. Is there any gap, right? Like if we think it's important to have the code of conduct in every single one, does it have it, right? Because like as we add a new repo, and similarly the license, like just saying whether you have a license or not is a good start. And then you could drive that into like, and is the license one that's approved by the foundation, right? And anyway, pretty simple tool, but I think it gets the most value when it's really something that you use more. Like if we used it across Node, that's great, but if it was used across all the foundation projects, it would be even better. So the Linux Foundation, I mean, I think as I understood it, the Linux staff had that somewhere in their backlog, but honestly, that's been, I don't know if I'd count in years, but it's at least one. Wes, you have your hand up.
Yeah, well, that's kind of what I was going to say is, there's perfect here, and then
Yeah.
there's actually realistic for us to get done. So to me, it seems like if we just forked template OSS and just started slowly getting that integrated in for Node, and then make sure that the node guidelines are pretty close to the Linux Foundation guidelines, which I mean, I think they at least have to be a subset, right? Like we can't make a decision that goes against a Linux Foundation guideline. So it seems like that would be a relatively well-scoped start. And again, this is where like perfect. Ideally, I think Darcy, you mentioned the problem is that you have to get all of them onboarded and then they have to update. And that means Dependabot. And I know people are, I mean, we probably don't have Dependabot running on all the node project repos either. We do have Renovate running on most of the package PKGJS ones. Not all though. So ideally, what we probably should do is make a GitHub action workflow that is a layer in between running these that we could update, and we could roll it out with it being a no op to everything very quickly, because that's a tiny little file that I don't think we could just say. And then from here, we could then add our opinions slowly. Because I think it's not just the, we may have, they should evolve, right? I guess that was my point. They should evolve. And that would then require no updates on the user side. We could still deploy changes and they would be, because they'd be referencing the, at V1, as long as it wasn't a quote unquote breaking change, we could run the action, and impose or like lint the project. Does that make sense? Like just putting a shim there means that we'd be able to update it without every project having to like merge a PR to get the update, right? Which is, I think, the better state, because then we're not putting more burden on them.
But even for the node project, finding somebody who's going to add an action for every single repo is non-trivial amount of work. I mean, I'm not saying no, don't do it, but that would be my concern, is we'll never do it because that requires an action on, I don't know how many repos it is, but a large number, versus some tool that will just externally read through and take a look. Darcy's got his hand up.
Totally valid. I'm not opposed to that either.
I think Rick was first, so go ahead, Rick.
Okay.
Oh, thank you. So my thought was, GitHub does have this community standard, which if you look at the community standards for each of the repos, it does have like a checklist of items similar to what we're gunning for here, which is like, does it have a license? Does it have a contributing? Does it have, that sort of thing? Like if there's not a way for us just to scrape off that API from GitHub, that could provide us what we're looking for off the bat without having to do a lot of heavy lifting, because that's essentially what we're looking for from a repository level. And I'm speaking repository, not package level, because obviously the package level is different. You got to make sure those are included and stuff like that. But that's just an idea that popped in my head when I had to get our open source repositories into a standard shape, was making sure that the community standards were all green across the board.
Where is that?
So if you go to the insights under the repository, there's the community section in there, or I should say, where did I see it? Hold on, let me go to. I'm in the internal one. Yeah, right there.
Standards.
Exactly. So where they get that data from, like, could we not just scrape against that and pull that data across?
Yeah, I know that's yeah. Right, because a bunch of those seem like, certainly the code of conduct contributing license, it would be what other ones would we potentially forget when we're like,
of course,
we started with if something moves in, one of the things I know we want is like these things, right? And so, yeah, if it just scraped that would be an actually really good starting. We'd want like a snapshot of like everything in Node. Are there any non-conformant ones would be,
yeah. Darcy, you can go if you want. That was my point.
Yeah, is it okay if I share my screen?
go for it.
Cool. Just make sure that I don't got no emails. Great. So I don't think a lot of people have ever been to this. Maybe Michael, maybe you're the only one. But I'm surprised at like the OpenJS F, and you might have insights here, Michael.
This is where they said they would add in, like the initial ask we discussed was just like a license check.
Yeah, so like this is the Linux Foundation Insights product that they have, as well as they have a security portal as well for projects. So example like GraphQL, a bunch of other projects are in these dashboards. But diving into, let's say, even like the CNCF, you can go into specific projects, or you can see at a high level the state of different projects here. So like I can quickly, let's open up, let's actually go into like Helm, let's say, which is under the CNCF as a project. You get all the same kind of information I think we're looking to essentially source here from at the repo level. Like, so, over time you start to get histograms over traction, like stars or whatever, full forks, pull requests, all that kind of stuff. And also you get scores about the actual, let's say, legal standards, and you can actually go into a breakdown of all this kind of stuff. So I'm just wondering, like, I don't want us to have to do work that would maybe be redundant if there is a way that we, like, somebody's full-time job might be supporting this at the Linux Foundation, and all we need to do is tap them to support the OpenJS Foundation projects to get us added to this and not have to duplicate efforts. So that's kind of why I'm like obviously bullish on us creating something ourselves and have like pushed for that. And I know it's exactly to your point, Michael. Like, sounds like maybe it's been a
I think
conversation.
like that's my understanding is it's on the backlog to add the ask to this, right?
Right.
And
Like
because it's a
Node
little
should be in
different, like
here.
this is kind of like top level info. We really
Well,
want for all the projects in org, but is there a license or not? Was just a simple, like, because I know as you get through and is it one of I think the ask was, and is it one of the ones that the board has approved for our project, for the foundation, right?
yeah, so like there should be I would imagine there should be a card for every single repository. When loaded up, every single repository should essentially have a card here, giving you information about the legal security, reliance standards, etc.
Yeah, I don't know if you could drill down to like the 100 and so repos in the node.org, right?
I mean, it's that would be my assumption based on this tool. The tool's different
Do you
project
think like that
definition.
Helm all, no, is there?
Now, each individual one has like a reference to the individual repository, right? So it links
Okay,
directly. Yeah, so like that would be my understanding is that there would be, obviously these all have like logos and they're
right.
explicit projects, but I'm trying to see if I can scroll down to get something that's not.
Yeah, if you can find something which is like a repo under, like for example, anyway, we got a whole bunch of them, but like it's
Yeah,
not the
like so you
org,
could
it's
just keep
the,
going. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So anyways, I just wanted to show that because it's kind of in line, but also in order to see this, I needed to be logged into Linux Foundation .org. So it is like this information is like gated then. So I do see a reason why we might not want to go that path, but it does seem like duplicate effort. If there's already a system that we can leverage it just seems like we just need to get all the projects loaded into the system, and then ideally it's doing the automation. Um,
The way I'd cast it is we started the discussion of like, are we doing the right thing when we move projects in?
right.
And this is a risk management thing. So we have our governance. So our governance is like we should be opening an issue. And we have like today a manual check of like if I look at it, I try and remember like, hey, is there a license? Do we have this thing? Like, yeah, okay, you have these things, good. And that's the same thing the Node project does. So I think like we're consistent between the PKGS and Node project. And then we kind of went down this other path and like I'm like, hey, but you could be better, right? And the way I look at it is we've asked the foundation for help to make it better. If we have somebody in our project who wants to jump in and make it better, that's good. But I feel like maybe okay that like we've asked the foundation, and if it's not a higher priority than it's been to help us improve it, then we've done our due diligence, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying I'd be really happy if somebody came up with the tool and enabled it and did it all, but on the other hand, I kind of agree with you that like it would be good to do it at the broad scale. And we did make that ask.
Yeah,
At
just
least
because it
starting
seems like
point,
a lot more, it will be more formal and it will become like a check mark for it, you know, a new project gets created. We all discuss on this, you know, call
Yep.
that we want to create a new repository for whatever tool. Because we don't know if it's going to be, you know, a flop or not, like, you know, but,
Yeah.
and we don't necessarily want to create churn, but like there should be that should be the gate for whether or not that repository gets created is it going to be added to this list of like this dashboard that makes it observable? Because right now we're kind of like, if we keep creating projects in PKGJS that don't get tracked, the concern is that we like there's not if there's nobody that's tracking this work, then there's no point in doing diligence to ensure
Right.
that's
That's kind
being
of where I'm getting at. Like
yeah
we have a bit of diligence, but to really close the loop, we need automation.
yeah
And we're not unique in that automation. I think it
yeah
like
like
should
node
be
yeah
it should be added to anytime we add a repo, it should automate like if the LFX dashboard is a thing that tracks the things, it should automatically show up.
right
And it should
totally
generate some sort of message that says, hey, wait a second, you now have a repo in your a repo in your org that doesn't have a license. We feel this is really important as the OpenJS Foundation, so we're letting you know, right? And we can also do that at the node level, but it all comes down to like the work
it just
and
seems
doing it at the
redundant work
foundation
like
level
that
is
we're
best.
doing in the scope of our world when there's like it already looks like this is happening for the CNCF and other
Yeah.
um so it's just like, why can't we leverage that existing tool? Is there a cost? Maybe, right? Is it that OpenJS has to like pay into having the projects be tracked in that way or something, or give some
We're
of its
already in
budget?
the LFX dashboard.
Well, the projects, I can't find any of the projects right now. I think I saw it historically. I think you're right. I was able to find it, but even just searching now, I couldn't find um I can't find Node. I can't find jQuery in that dashboard. I can't find any um,
I
like
looked at a dashboard, maybe it's a different one today.
if you could share that link, that'd be great. Yeah.
Yeah, let me just see if I can find that quickly. I need to open a deck I was working on.
But again, going back to the cons of that strategy and using this tool in particular, it does seem that it's gated behind off. So it's not something like those kind of scorecards, those kinds of like insights, I don't think will be able to be shared broadly. But I'm not sure if that's
Oh,
just like something that can be configured so that we could share like those cards and those you know.
yeah, I agree. This one you had to be logged into a Linux Foundation account. This one was like I don't know if it's the same one, but like there's Project Analytics.
Yeah, so this is what I feel like maybe this is buried because I'm even getting a little notification here on this dashboard saying that there's a new version of Insights with better UI and more
Okay.
metrics.
So yes, I did see that now that I remember, like, and no, I couldn't find Node in the new one.
Right. So somehow in the transition from this older version, the V2 Insights V2 to the new Insights dashboards, we've got lost in translation. So
Right.
so that's a good call out. But I feel like this solves the problem and like
I'm gonna like say maybe like we can't have to drill down to every repo. The the whole thing needs to be like an in your face,
single
like
view of all the
scan,
projects. Yeah,
it needs
yeah.
to scan, like I need to say for the node org, if there's a repo that doesn't have a license, I get an email, or in the worst case, like a dashboard I could look at once a day, right?
Right, so
Like,
just like what we had for NPM. So basically exactly what you see with NPM, it tells you the license, it tells you the status of the package, it tells you how many issues, all in a single dashboard for all the projects.
and I don't even like, for me, I wouldn't want even to have all those issues and stuff. This would be, I was thinking more like purely governance wise, right? Because we started the discussion on like, hey, we move a new repo in, right? I don't necessarily care how many issues. I don't necessarily like that. That's good, but it's purely from the governance perspective is like, do we have the required boilerplate files? Is the license something that that is approved, or do we need an exception? Because we have the manual check today. Like that's all we check manually when somebody says, hey, can we move it in? We'll look and say, like, first of all, do we agree it should come in? Yes. Okay, then it's like license okay. Do we have these boilerplate files that we want? Yes. We pull it in. So we do have a manual check, but it's easy for for you to forget it, or maybe for some reason somebody deletes one of the files or whatever, right? And so, the automated check that basically tells you for these minimum requirements, you're either in or out of compliance is where I think would be helpful. And even like at the OpenJS level would be interesting for me to know as a CPC member, all of our projects, we've got a tool. It scanned all their repos. All of their repos have a license. Or no, these 10 don't have license. That would be like a really useful, I think, ongoing piece of information for the foundation to have. Or even like we have a requirement that you have a code of conduct, right? Or I think we've discussed in the past that like, maybe you're going to need to have a security reporting thing, like that minimum list of things, whereas a CPC we've said are requirements. It's really hard to manually check on that, right?
Yeah, so if I had a assistant, I would tell them to go build the action right now, just because
Yeah.
I don't know. But it really is a simple action. Like I was able to spin up the project dashboard for NPM in like a day.
Yeah.
So if you're okay, if folks on the call are okay with it be living like this dashboard living essentially in the package maintenance repo, we could create the action there, and then it could just spin up similar to what we did in NPM. We could spin up just a GitHub Pages view of it, and it's just a table.
Yeah, no, that sounds
Okay.
great. And then, the only caveat is the flip side of like, hopefully we can get the foundation to then adopt that as a bigger thing than just Node at some point, right? But I think right now, like having asked, and it'd been like quite a long time, if you can get somebody to do it, that's super good, right? Because like I'd love us to be able to say for Node and for PKGS, yeah, I can confidently say we meet these things, right? And not have to actually go look or anything like that. Okay, yeah, no, that sounds great. So Wes, on that one, I think you were saying we can probably close it out then, right?
Yeah, I was actually just drafting a comment to close it
Okay,
out.
go for it.
Do you want to track this discussion separately then? That's what I had written. And I was going to link over to because there's the status board. Oh, but that's the impactful status board is the current one. Okay. Do we need
Yeah, I
another
think that's a
issue?
little different because like
It's
then I
it's
see
different
like there's
than
more
the
info, right? Yeah.
yeah.
One
Do
is
we
sort
need-
of like helping us manage the governance. The other one is like, are they healthy or not? And
Yeah, so I think we need a new issue then to track this thread. Okay, I'll make that then after the call.
Okay. Sounds great. Okay, then let's move on to the next issue, which was impactful status board.
Yeah, I don't have any updates over the last 2 months, I would say. My time has gotten eaten up by other things. So starting a new company takes time.
Yeah, I can
So
see that being a
unfortunately,
bit of a priority. The next one then is 542, create a doc on how to support ESM and CommonJS when publishing modules. I don't think there's any updates on that. Luke, maybe you can Remind
No, I
me.
mean, I haven't heard anything, and
Okay.
I don't think there is any stuff that's been going on there. And I'm wondering, like, because I think I was waiting for Jordan to write something up, but
Okay.
I'm wondering if I should maybe just take that and start writing something just to start a discussion.
I would say it'd be great if you could put something together and we can use that as a discussion.
Yeah.
Because
Okay.
it's been a while and like people, time comes and goes. So if you can do something, it's always something written helps move things forward.
Yep.
Okay, that's great. You're gonna just cut the write up. Then the next one is the next steps for PKGS create.
I think this is Wes. If you can speak to this.
Sorry, multitasking. I've got lunch and stuff. Sorry, hold on. I'm catching up. Trying to find the issue.
Here, I'll paste the issue in the chat just to make it easy. I think the last comment is that you and Ethan were maybe going to get together to
Yes,
document
right.
the plan, but
We have been and did some of that on the package metadata interop collab space. Specifically, this is actually, now that I'm looking at this is the one that I linked to the create PKG issue number 16 that I linked before we started the recording, just as like a add this onto the agenda. So
okay.
The collab space is doing two things in parallel. One is the bulk of the work, which is documenting and doing an exploratory thing about all the different facets of package JSON and the different things that the different, supported by the different tools and that stuff. So that's really being housed under the collab space fully. We have a separate repo for that. The second thing is helping consolidate some of the tooling around it. So what we thought we would do is piggyback off the work we had started, 3 or 4 years ago with the create dash package names, right? And so I've been working on updating create package JSON. And through that, Ethan brought up a bit of confusion about how these things fit together. So there's a diagram in there about, sort of a layered approach to the packages so that we don't, have one big create PKG thing that is like, a monolith.
When you say diagram, is there a link? Is that it's number 7 that's in?
Let me see here.
Right, I think that's it. Is the overall design for the project is the one you just okay. I didn't have that context. Okay.
Yeah, so I worked on that and then I sort of I thought I had presented it here. I'm sorry, I'm getting the link for the chat.
You probably did. It's just been a few years, so
yeah, it has.
You've forgotten.
It has, and it's in 2020. And then I had Chris Hiller working on it with me for a little bit. I had a few other people who John, I think, mentioned some interest at the point. And I see them anyway. Point is, we're now actually like trying to do these in parallel. So Ethan wants to, do some code here. But I think his expression, I think is valid, is that like if we've spread it out across multiple repos, it's not quite clear how they fit together. And so we have two choices we discussed. One is better document it and get it, a place where it describes how everything fits together. And the other is just combine it into a single repo so that we can consolidate. We thought a single repo was better. We proposed it. Jordan had some feedback, not really liking what we were talking about. I think we decided but recognizing that this group technically owns these packages. So we decided in the other group, it just where, the overlap is strong enough that we figured it was safe.
Yep.
That we would just charge ahead. And despite Jordan's we're trying to address some of Jordan's concerns without necessarily saying we're just going to go multi-repo. So we're going to just use npm workspaces. We're going to consolidate, create PKG, create package JSON. I'll probably, and this is why I asked about transferring packages. We might transfer over the create git, which I made, but just try to like bring it all together so that it's not quite so confusing on how the pieces fit. So what
Okay,
I
so
thought we should discuss here is like, does anybody strongly agree with Jordan and that we should just not do that yet? Or are we like safe to take a few risks on consolidating it? Just to get
so
things.
sorry for the minutes, I just want to clarify. So the suggestion isn't to move them out of the PKGS org to the collaboration space, is to consolidate a number of things that are already in the PKG space, right?
Yeah, and possibly some new
Okay.
things that are not. So there'd be some net new work. We've also
Right,
talked
okay.
to folks on NPM side about some of the packages they have and figuring out how to like collaborate and share some stuff. Whether that pans out or not, I mean, we have to do the legwork for that to ever pan out, and this has been sitting since 2020. So, your mileage may vary, but yeah, that's the idea. Is basically have a home for some of the tooling we can all agree on is sort of foundational to managing and reading from package JSONs and stuff. Well, yes, that too.
So I think Rick then Darcy has his hand up. So we'll go to Rick.
Oh no, I was just gonna say I second that. Like making the movement of to the the monorepo bit of consolidating these packages, just these repos, just because the amount of work that would be consistently moved across, things can get lost easier when you're like lost when they're across multiple repos versus in a consistent tooling repository that obviously it's all very relative to each other. So I was just gonna second that of what Wes is saying.
Darcy?
So I guess I have like two comments or two related things. One is I want to make sure that we don't get blocked on discussions like this or like feedback like this in the future, because it seemed like this took a bunch of time, just like, oh, so one person's piece of feedback obviously like is delaying work from getting done. So I'm wondering if like one, when it gets like this, can we have a vote in these calls, and what quorum looks like, to have a meeting and have votes? Because I think we've been pretty loose with like with all the work that we've been doing up until now. And I just want to make sure like, one, we're being respectful of like people's feedback, but two, like we're not blocking work from getting done. So like when people have conflicting thoughts on how we move forward, can we just like vote and move forward, like agree to disagree? And then what does quorum look like? Because I know that at the Bilbao OpenJS or the OpenJS Worlds, our collab summit that we had in Bilbao, I presented a slide deck about this working group, and one particular slide which basically enumerated all the current quote unquote current participants of this working group, and there's like 37, I think I enumerated. So is there work that we should also queue up here in a separate discussion maybe, or at another time, to corral some of the folks that are not necessarily participating, so that we can put in place, let's say, some rules about what quorum is when we have to vote on things. So those are the two kind of like different things that you relate to this, but I just want to make sure we're not getting blocked. Like we're not slowing things down.
Yeah, I'll add my 2 cents to a couple of those things. I think yes, in terms of members at the beginning, we were very much like, hey, join the working group, no problem. But I think you're right that we're at the point now, and it's been long enough. We should do a filter through of the members. Overall, I suspect somewhere our governance will refer back to like what we use across the node.js project for consensus seeking. There's just a discussion in the CPC, so I'll mention like my take on that is like everybody should have the option to object. So like if somebody proposes something, there's an objection, Um, we try and spend enough time to see if we can convince them. If it's clear it's not going to convince them, then it should be as simple as like opening an issue that says we need to reach consensus on this. And like who objects? I guess in that case we've already objected in the meeting. But it
Yeah,
does
I'm
come down
not
to like
concerned with objections, but how do we,
yeah.
and I'm not, and I don't think we can ever, there's no such thing as probably 100% consensus. I mean, sometimes there is that you reach consensus, 100% consensus, but the idea is like if we have to vote on something like a path forward,
Yep.
who has the right to vote? What makes a vote valid, like in terms of the percent of members that have to be a part of that vote? And how do we like move forward past that? So I'm proposing this now because it seems like I want to get ahead of the next time that we have an objection to something that we want to do. And yeah.
Yeah, no,
Right.
can I
Go
take
ahead.
it in just a slightly different direction, maybe? So we have a different org for a reason. When we discussed making this, the whole point was to make it so that we didn't have to do experiments with the same scrutiny as the Node.js org, right? Like things that go in the Node.js org have a whole ton of bars they have to meet. Well, they should, and arguably we probably have too much in the Node.js org today. And we made the PKGJS org partly to alleviate some of those problems, right? Additionally, the governance is delegated to this group. And so we can actually change some of the, or we don't have to follow everything that Node does for Node's
Correct.
consensus. We do probably have to, if we make a change, we do probably have to get it approved. But at the same time, we don't have to make our policy the same. So to that note, combining the two things there, we're trying to make this more for experiments and pushing some boundaries and trying new stuff and being able to iterate and do that quickly. And second, that we can have a different governance. I propose that we do that. And what I would propose is that the people who are working on the given code are the deciders. They're the only people who get a vote at the time of the issue, unless somebody like makes a big stink or I mean, we need to like figure out what the level of thing is. Like maybe that group could raise it to this group or something. But like the goal here is to keep things that are effectively very low risk. Like these are very low risk decisions, right? What we're talking about here. These are not highly used packages. These are not, under the Node core umbrella directly. They're not shipped with Node. Like almost all the stuff we're talking about here is really low risk. So like we should have a process that addresses that this is low risk, and it should be equally as loose and small, right, as the projects themselves. So to
Yeah, I
me,
think
it'd be fine if because we already have a contributors group on each of these repos in GitHub, and people have asked for being a part of each one. And to me, if you ask to be a part of one and you don't participate, we maybe should have a 6-month
right.
bump out. But if you are actively participating and somebody, so to be very concrete here, I am the only one who is committed to most of these in a concrete way. Jordan has opinions and has not contributed to them. Ethan wants to contribute. So ideally, the decision is Ethan and I's, right?
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm like I'm looking through our governance because what I was trying to get to, which I obviously didn't get to, is like this group should be able to fairly easily, as long as we give everybody the thing to object, then it should be simple majority. But I think even further, our governance has delegated like ownership of the individual like the individual repos to the people who are on the list for the repo. I'm just trying to find where that is though.
Yeah, I don't think that's the problem. It's more so like we're all trying to be a development team together.
Yeah.
Right? Like and we don't want for someone to make an objection and then we end up with like 2 experiments when we only really need one, or we really should be collaborating on just one. And so like I'm not trying for us to replicate what Node has. Like if there's a simple mechanism that we can implement, like voting, like taking something to a vote, and then we know who can and can't vote, or it's clearly defined who can and can't vote on that decision, then it just like will unblock us. Versus having like having to be messy about it and being like not clear about when we need to like enact this kind of like mechanism to move forward. Because otherwise we just get like, we're going to discuss something that's to me very benign and small, like let's use mono repos and let's bring all these bring a bunch of relevant projects together. Like it just feels like it's going to, you know, like you shouldn't have to have a long conversation back and forth about this. So.
Yeah, I wish we'd written that down because I think like Wes said from the beginning, we were kind of like we've delegated to the maintainers of each package the way forward, right? So the default assumption is that those people could make the decision, but I just
Yeah, it's
trying.
just like what happens when the maintainers then let's say if somebody's committed like one small thing to become a maintainer. Let's say I like fix a typo, you know, when do we add that maintainer? And like I get we want flexibility, we want to be kind of ad hoc, but at the same time we're doing like or we're putting significant effort behind, let's say like the package JSON research that's happening that Evan or Ethan has like kicked off in OpenJSF. Myself and Wes have invested time, obviously, Wes more than I, into the actual tooling. So like obviously his voice it should be also like one of the strongest in terms of like how we move forward. So but I don't want it to be like messy. I want it to be just quick for us to be like, hey, let's just all get on a vote or get on a call, this call specifically, and then vote. But like what does that, because I felt like we had consensus with the folks that were on the group on the call before, and then I know that none of us want to like hurt each other's feelings by like making anybody feel like they're unheard. So if it's just simple and easy to point to the fact that we voted on something, there was an outcome, we documented it, then it's hard to have any objections past that.
I will happily write up something if folks want us to have a proposed addition to the governance here. I could probably lift the exact thing we wrote for the Express Repo Captain's proposal and that Jaresh formalized into this because I think it is very close to what we want here. I have to go review it. I think the way that it works is I'm just trying to remember. So I think the way that worked was a person who was a contributor could ask to be a repo captain, and a repo captain would then be approved by the TSC, and they would have the so contributors have write access to the repo and all that, but the repo captains would have publish rights in addition or something like that. I can't remember the exact details. And then so the idea would be the formalization here would be, yeah, it's effectively delegating a lead. Yes, exactly right. So most projects probably only have one repo captain, but maybe more active ones could have multiple if that's what we wanted. But like at least every single one should have one repo captain, and that person is the publisher and the ultimate, the decider up until a big issue happens or they go MIA or, one of these other things, like we could enumerate certain, requirements. And then this group again would be the operating as the TSC to delegate that. Okay. If everybody thinks that's important to codify, I am happy to try to figure out a doc that I don't want to spend a ton of time. So I'm probably just going to copy and paste. Yeah.
Like I think you might be able to just that section I pasted in is from the governance we have, and it says that like we will make maintainers for the repos within the PKGS org. I think just expanding on that to make it that the maintainers are the ones who can make a decision, like are responsible for the decisions that are related to that particular repo, right?
I think you need a lead though. I think you need somebody that ultimately will have the trump card to make a decision and move forward, right? Like,
Yeah, and it could be multiple people as long as they have, some. No, you don't think it can be multiple people? Okay.
I don't think you can. I don't think you can.
Well, you could do a lead and a backup. You could do a lead and a backup. Like, whenever a big thing in America goes down with the president and the vice president there, they always have that single person. That's kind of the deal. If the lead's not available, then you have someone to shift to that you can reach out to that can make the final decision as a proxy for the lead. Although
I think it just
you
comes
just have
back
to
to
make
this
sure the lead
group.
and the
Like, we just
proxy.
have to find a new lead, right? Like,
Yeah.
you have the lead, and then it comes back to the group, and we find somebody else to basically fill in, right? So if somebody goes rogue, MIA, then
Then we just delegate a new lead. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I'm on board with that.
just
Again, the
because
whole
it's very
point
clear
here
to
is
figure
keep
out
it
who's the
simple
lead in
and
each
keep
one
it
of the
moving.
projects, right?
Right, yeah. And the whole goal here is these are supposed to be as high velocity. Let's get out of people's way to do some work. So to me, yeah, that makes sense. I'm fine with that. And then we would have to propose the change, and then we would have to approve
Vote.
it. Does that have to go to nodes? Because it is a governance change. Does that have to go to the TSC?
Yeah, I don't know. Like if it's going to go into our governance, maybe. Yeah. Anyway, why don't we get the PR and we can look at it, and then if it does need, it's like a quick. It's it's like an FYI, any objections to this, right? And we'll see if there's any concerns of. I'm guessing there won't be too many. The only thing is it's slightly different in like assigning a single person versus like the maintainers of the repo or effectively the decision makers. But I would say like let's just have the section, and then it's a like, hey, do you see any objections? No, and then it'll just let, right?
Okay. Yeah, sounds good to me. I'll probably not get to that today, but I will open a PR soon.
Thumbs up.
And I think Rick is right. We're at time. Are we?
We are just at over time, so yeah, and we've covered the issues. So I guess we might as well close out for this week, and guess we'll see everybody in GitHub and next time.
Sounds good. Bye,
Cheers.
y'all.
Okay, thanks. Bye.